Join our community by subscribing. Every click helps us share more stories like this one. The introduction. In the quiet suburban town of Pine Brook, an unsettling silence lingered in the crisp morning air. The muted buzz of early commuters blended with the distant chirping of birds, creating an ordinary symphony that masked the chaos about to unfold. Pine Brook was a place where neighbors greeted one another, and doors remained unlocked, their inhabitants fostering a sense of camaraderie that felt impenetrable. However, beneath this deceptive facade of tranquility, a dark storm was brewing. On the morning of January 16, 2021, the town awoke to the shocking news of a missing person. Sarah Dawson, a respected 32-year-old elementary school teacher, had not arrived at work. The somber tone of the local radio station reporting her disappearance sent ripples through the community, shattering the calm that had defined Pine Brook. Friends and family who depended on her unwavering positivity and indomitable spirit were struck with dread and disbelief. Sarah had been the beacon for her students and a cherished friend to many. Her absence at Brookview Elementary was like a dark cloud overshadowing the school. As concerned voices filled the small town, it became painfully clear that Sarah wasn't just missing. She had vanished without a trace. The police were summoned, sparking an exhaustive search that would test the limits of the close-knit community's resilience. Yet, in these early hours, no one could anticipate the tangled web of secrets, lies, and dark undercurrents that would soon come to light. The stage was set. Pine Brook would never be the same again. The victim. Sarah Dawson was born and raised in Pine Brook. Her childhood was idyllic, spent exploring the wooded trails behind her home and crafting make-believe adventures with her childhood friends. She was known for her enthusiastic laughter, a sound that echoed through the cottages of the neighborhood, drawing friends in with its warmth. After excelling in her studies, she returned to Pine Brook after college, determined to leave a mark on her hometown through education. As a teacher at Brookview Elementary, Sarah was beloved by her students and admired by her peers. She had an innate ability to connect with children, making lessons come alive, pulling the brightest and the shyest into her orbit with equal fervor. Each day, her classroom was a vibrant space filled with creativity, laughter, and learning. Sarah had a unique knack for seeing the potential in every child, creating a safe sanctuary where they felt valued and inspired. But beneath Sarah's engaging exterior was a complex individual wrestling with the weight of unspoken anxieties. Friends noted her tendency to overthink, often worrying about the well-being of others before herself. She felt responsible for everyone, a trait that was both her strength and her greatest vulnerability. Despite her upbeat demeanor, there were episodes of fatigue that lingered just beneath the surface days when she would retreat into her thoughts, her smile tinged with a hint of melancholy. In the weeks leading up to her disappearance, those close to her observed subtle changes. Late-night phone calls became more frequent, and her once steadfast routine altered. Rumors of a tumultuous breakup echoed among her friends, adding to the sense of concern. Perhaps these were merely ripples in Sarah's otherwise steadfast life. However, some sensed the undercurrents of a brewing storm. As the search began, it became crucial to understand not just who Sarah was on the surface, but the layers beneath a journey into her life that could unlock the clues to the mystery of her disappearance. Crime scene. Daylight had barely broken when Pine Brook police received their first tip about Sarah Dawson's whereabouts. In a wooded area at the edge of town, a pair of hikers stumbled upon an ominous sight, a burning scent of decay mingled with damp earth, unsettling and impossible to ignore. As they ventured deeper into the underbrush, the shadows cast by the canopy of trees grew longer, and their hearts quickened when they discovered a neatly folded piece of clothing. Unmistakably, Sarah's favorite blue cardigan. The police were alerted immediately, and within the hour, a team was dispatched to the scene. The area was cordoned off. A line of bright yellow tape fluttering in the breeze, stark against the serene backdrop of nature, with the faint sound of rustling leaves and the distant calls of wildlife. This tranquil setting became a focus for their investigation. The silence heavy with unspoken dread. As officers scoured the location, fragments of evidence emerged, much like the layers of the thick underbrush. They found her backpack, undisturbed, still holding her personal items, a half-finished lesson plan, and a half-empty water bottle, as if she'd planned to meet someone there. The unease intensified as they discovered small bloodstains on a nearby rock, a stark red against its natural hues. This was no mere accident. Something sinister had unfolded here. The investigators combed through the area meticulously, collecting samples and documenting every detail. The woodland was alive with possibilities left in the mud, the angle of the sunlight filtering through branches, but each clue only threw them deeper into an unsettling maze. The discovery of the clothing, the blood, and the backpack shaped the investigation profoundly, sparking hushed conversations in the precinct and casting doubt and fear throughout the town. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with shades of purple and orange, the mood grew grim. Pine Brook had never experienced such horror, and they were left to grapple with an unsettling truth. Amid the beauty of their town lurked the raw reality of human malice. Sarah Dawson had vanished, and the indelible mark of crime had stained their beloved community. The hunt for the truth had only just begun. The early investigation. The initial days following Sarah Dawson's disappearance were marked by urgency and an overwhelming sense of concern. Detective Mark Sullivan was called in to lead the investigation, a seasoned investigator with a keen eye for detail and a no-nonsense approach influenced by over a decade of experience in criminal cases. As he gathered with his team in the makeshift command center established at the local community center, the tension in the air was palpable. Detective Sullivan started by reviewing the vital facts. Sarah's disappearance was clearly a priority, and every available resource would need to work in unisondrones. Canine units and volunteers from the community would ebb and flow like a tide, searching for signs of the beloved teacher. Officers were dispatched to canvass the town, interviewing neighbors and colleagues, trying to assemble a timeline of Sarah's final days. The teachers at Brookview Elementary were devastated, echoing the fear and confusion rippling through the town. As small groups gathered in classrooms, sharing memories of Sarah, hints of unusual behavior began to surface during the interviews, her late-night calls, a palpable tension leading up to her disappearance, and whispers of a secret relationship. Detectives took meticulous notes, piecing together swirling fragments of information that could help them understand the woman they were trying to find. Meanwhile, digital forensics experts scoured Sarah's social media accounts, combing through her online communications for clues. As they dissected her posts, they noticed a recurring motif. Sarah often spoke about community, connection, and the pressure she felt to be everything for everyone around. Her friend group was tight-knit, and while lacking any obvious suspects, the detectives soon realized that close relationships often concealed hidden complexity. As the days slid into nights, the lack of concrete evidence felt like an insurmountable weight pressing upon the shoulders of those searching. The swirling winds of speculation and fear began to take their toll on the community, transforming Pine Brook from a place of safety into a town gripped by anxiety. Continuously questioning who among them could be harboring secrets that could unlock the fate of their missing teacher. With each passing hour, the urgency to unravel the truth grew. Detective Sullivan understood more than ever that the key to finding Sarah Dawson lay entwined within her connections threading through the very fabric of a seemingly perfect town that had suddenly been shadowed by the darkness of crime. The dead ends. A week had passed since Sarah Dawson's disappearance, and the initial spark of hope that accompanied the first few days was beginning to fade into a suffocating dread. Detective Sullivan and his team had tested countless leads, each one fizzing out like a sparkler on a damp night. Each conversation turned into a round of no seen, no heard, leaving them back at square, one again and again. The emotional toll hung heavy in the air, a reminder of their responsibility to a community teetering on the edge of despair. Among the leads was a mysterious voicemail discovered on one of Sarah's personal devices. The message, half buried in static, contained muffled sounds and inaudible words that strained the detective's patience. They played the recording on repeat in the hopes that something, anything, would become clear. But it remained nothing more than noise in endless cycle of frustration. Uncertainty cast long shadows in Sullivan's mind. He feared they were chasing ghost echoes. Yet, there was one lead that had sparked initial interest. A witness claimed to have seen Sarah speaking to a man in a dark hoodie near the park where her belongings were found. With this description in hand, the police began canvassing the area, questioning anyone who might have seen them together. But their inquiries led them to a string of closed doors. The description was as vague as it was common, and every potential match turned into yet another dead end. The community was restless. Rumors churned like dark clouds overhead. Speculation spiraled, with many people pointing fingersome citing the ex-boyfriend, others veering toward a mysterious newcomer spotted at local cafes. Whispered accusations created fissures in friendships, and the tight-knit town began to fracture under the strain of indecision and fear. As Sullivan returned to the precinct late one evening, he was met by the glimmering blue light reflecting off his desk's surface, a stark reminder of the weight on his shoulders. The clock ticked relentlessly, mirroring the growing anxiety that churned within him. Every moment away from a resolution felt like time stolen from Sarah Dawson, and with each passing day, they edged closer to the haunting possibility that she might never return. In the midst of this chaos, the detective realized that sometimes the most difficult aspect of an investigation was navigating through the emotional rubble left in its wake. As the shadows lengthened, he knew that finding Sarah who she was, what she stood for, would require delving beyond mere clues and into the fragile heart of a community fractured by a crime that had unspooled their reality. A break in the case, just as the biting cold of February began to seep into Pine Brook. A glimmer of hope flickered within the precinct. It happened quite unexpectedly. An anonymous tip, marked by urgency, arrived not via the usual channels, but through a message left on the department's dedicated hotline. The voice was shaky, hesitant, almost lost in the static, yet there was a conviction that grabbed Sullivan's attention immediately. Please, listen. I saw something in the woods. The caller declined to provide personal details, shrouding their identity in mystery, but revealed that they had witnessed a confrontation on the outskirts of town the night Sarah disappeared. "There were two of them," the caller managed, their voice breaking. "I think one of them was her." The message cut off abruptly, leaving Sullivan with a flurry of questions and a renewed sense of purpose. With the lead fresh in mind, Detective Sullivan gathered his team for a swift reassessment of the previous searches. They needed to re-examine the wooded area where Sarah's belongings had been found in light of this new information. Urgency propelled them forward as they prepared for another round of combing through the underbrush, armed this time, not just with their gear, but with the knowledge that they might be close to answers. Back at the scene, the atmosphere was different. The trees that once seemed to loom menacingly now held the promise of revelation. Officers meticulously searched for anything that could corroborate the witness's story, and soon uncovered fragments of evidence that hadn't been noticed before: disturbed earth and a faded scrap of fabric barely visible beneath a thicket of brambles. As they worked, Sullivan reviewed the initial sketches and reports done during previous searches, paying more attention to the layout of the woods and the possible retreat paths for someone fleeing. Everything began to connect in unexpected ways. Everything began to connect in unexpected ways. There was now a sense of urgency and a methodical energy vibrating through the team as they followed every lead, their spirits invigorated by the prospect of uncovering the truth. As the sun dipped low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the landscape, subtle whispers filled the air, suggesting that perhaps, just perhaps, the truth was within reach. Their hope surged, a sharp contrast to the despair that had clawed at them for countless days. In the midst of uncertainty, they could now envision a path leading closer to Sarah Dawson, a woman who had touched so many lives, and to the secrets that had entangled Pine Brook in shadows that could no longer remain hidden. The suspect. As the investigation pressed on, the anonymous tip bore weight, shifting the focus of the detectives' inquiries. Sullivan and his team began piecing together the narrative of the confrontation mentioned in the call. They identified a new suspect, Liam Porter, a 28-year-old resident of Pine Brook, a local handyman with a rough-around-the-edges charm. Liam had kept a low profile, but his past was tainted with brushes of violence and several run-ins with the law. Neighbors described him as quiet, but remarked on his unpredictable temper when provoked, reminding the detectives that people were not always what they seemed. As Sullivan's team delved deeper into Liam's background, they uncovered conflicting stories from those who had crossed paths with him. Some painted him as a hard worker, diligent and reliable, while others whispered of erratic behavior and violent outbursts fueled by alcohol. The contrasts painted a picture of a man struggling with emotional turmoil, and it wouldn't be long before officers sought to bring him in for questioning. On the appointed day, they found him working on a small construction project, hammering away as a soft rain pattered against the roof. Liam's surprise at their arrival quickly shifted into guarded defiance. As they introduced themselves, Sullivan couldn't help but notice the tension coiling in Liam's muscles, his eyes flitting about nervously, as if anticipating what would come next. The interrogation room was sparse, illuminated by harsh fluorescent lights that cast an unflattering glare on the mundane features of the space. Sullivan faced Liam with measured calm, keenly aware of the power dynamics in play. He began by asking routine questions, gauging Liam's reactions. Despite his bravado, it was clear that the handyman was unsettled. He fidgeted and offered incomplete responses, stammering when confronted about his whereabouts on the night Sarah went missing. When Sullivan confronted him with snippets of the insights gathered by the community rumors that linked Sarah and Liam together, in muffled conversations Liam's facade cracked, leading to a frantic denial that only served to heighten suspicion. "I didn't touch her. I didn't. Just leave me alone," he yelled, the veneer of control splintering as sweat dripped down his brow. The tension in the room vibrated as Sullivan leaned forward, eyes steady and searching for the truth. In that instant, the detective sensed the air thickening with secrets, the walls laden with countless possibilities. What had transpired in the woods between them? And how deep did this connection run? As they pressed further into Liam's alibi and began to lay out the discovery of Sarah's belongings, the pieces of the puzzle began to converge in alarming ways. Had they finally uncovered a suspect connected to Sarah's case? Or was this just another distraction in a web of deceit that surrounded Pine Brook? Each moment stretched with promise, yet uncertainty clouded their path, leaving the question hanging like a fragile promise in the still air. Would this lead to Sarah Dawson's salvation, or to more heartache among the shadows? The trial. Months had passed since Sarah Dawson's disappearance, and what began as frantic hope had slowly transformed into a collective mourning. The air of Pine Brook, once light with community gatherings and laughter, was now weighted with a heavy silence as residents awaited the trial of Liam Porter, charged with Sarah's murder. The courtroom was a spectacle of emotion, a battleground of grief and justice, as the truth unfolded in stark detail. Sullivan found himself seated in the back of the courtroom, a silent observer bearing witness to the weight of each testimony that tumbled forth. The atmosphere buzzed with an electric tension as the prosecution painted a grim portrait of Liam's actions leading up to that fateful night. Forensic evidence, including traces of Sarah's blood discovered at the crime scene, and the fabric swatches matching her clothing, told a chilling story of violence too difficult to comprehend. The prosecution's star witness was a neighbor who claimed to have heard raised voices in the vicinity of the park the night Sarah vanished. Her voice trembled as she recounted the harsh words exchanged and the unmistakable urgency in Sarah's tonia, haunting echo that reverberated the room, forcing those present to grapple with the sheer vulnerability of the missing teacher. Liam sat rigidly at the defendant's table, a ghost of the craftsman once known by the townsfolk. His defense painted him as a victim of circumstance, alleging that the evidence against him was circumstantial and that he had been in the wrong place at the wrong time. They argued that the accusations stemmed from nothing more than community fear and a desperate need for someone to blame. As the days turned into weeks, the trial unfolded like a meticulously crafted narrative, filled with emotional outbursts, tears, and moments of silence that amplified the sense of loss. Sullivan noted with solemn fascination how discussions of love, betrayal, and regret seeped into the very fabric of testimony. The impact of Sarah's absence loomed large, echoing through the faces of witnesses, making it evident that for many, she was not just a victim, but a vibrant part of a connected community, now fractured by darkness. Finally came the defense's closing statement, where Liam unexpectedly took the stand in his own defense. His voice shook as he professed his innocence, recounting a narrative peppered with contradictions and half-truths. "I didn't hurt her," he stammered, desperation pooling in his eyesight. It was difficult to discern the truth through the fog of chaos he exuded. As the jury deliberated, a tension hung heavily in the air, drawing families together and pushing others apart. Sullivan couldn't shake the feeling that justice was now balanced on a delicate edge, every moment amplifying the weight of what was at stake. Pine Brook stood on guard, awaiting the verdict that could either begin the long road to healing or plunge the community deeper into despair. Finally, the soft creak of the courtroom door signaled the jury's return, an all too familiar rhythm echoing through Sullivan's heart. As the forewoman spoke, the words that would change everything, the jury find the defendant guilty, a collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. A measured sense of relief mingled with deep sorrow settled over those present. Sarah's spirit would echo through the town for generations. Her legacy would not be lost. In the aftermath, Pine Brook began to emerge from the shadows, scarred yet resolute as they sought to reclaim their sense of community. And Detective Sullivan, in his complex role navigating grief and justice, felt the ripples of a case that would remain etched in his memory, a haunting reminder of the fragility of life and the unyielding quest for truth amidst the darkness. The aftermath. In the weeks following the trial's conclusion, Pine Brook grappled with the dual weight of relief and lingering sorrow. The verdict against Liam Porter had offered a semblance of justice, yet it was a hollow victory in a town forever altered by the loss of Sarah Dawson. The community came together in vigil, a poignant gathering in the heart of town where candles flickered like stars, illuminating the faces of the grieving. Here, people shared stories of Sarah, her laughter, her dedication to her students, and the way she made every moment feel significant. The moments during the vigil were bitter. As community members celebrated her spirit, they also confronted the questions that loomed large on their hearts. How had they missed the signs of unrest brewing beneath the surface? And overlooked the vulnerabilities in their close-knit fabric. With every candle lit, there was a collective promise to honor Sarah, not just in memory, but in action, to foster deeper connections and greater awareness of one another's struggles. Sullivan found himself amidst the crowd, reflecting on the role of the investigator as a hands-on participant in a healing journey. The pain that resonated in the voices around him painted the depth of loss, not just as a single tragic event, but as a collective wound that each person felt viscerally. He listened closely, absorbing their stories, hoping to glean understanding amidst the chaos of emotions that intertwined like the branches of the trees swaying gently in the refreshing evening air. In the following months, Pine Brook began to transform. Community workshops emerged, tackling the importance of mental health awareness, a topic often shrouded in silence. Sarah had always been an advocate for her students, fostering an inclusive environment where everyone's struggles were acknowledged. Her legacy pushed her hometown to confront its discomfort with vulnerability. Meanwhile, the case would haunt Sullivan in the quiet hours of the night. The complexities of individuals beneath the layers of circumstance pressed on his mind. He had known the darkness that the human heart could harbor, but Sarah's story reminded him of the light that could still shine amidst despair. He often revisited the knowledge that justice, while vital, could not erase the void her absence had left. As seasons shifted into another year, the town banded together to create a scholarship in her honor dedicated to students showing promise in education and the arts. It was a way to integrate Sarah's spirit into their future, to ensure that her generosity would echo through the hallways of Brookview Elementary for years to come. Even amid the healing, still lingered. Some residents found themselves wary, anxiety gnawing at them when the familiar shadows of the woods loomed close, memories entwined with fear and grief. I need to see your chief. I'll bear you out. I'll wait. But slowly, through heartache and connection, Pine Brook began to reclaim its strength, fortified by the resolve to be vigilant of one another's well-being and to nurture the bonds that held them together, knowing that with each day they were adding to the tapestry of resilience woven in remembrance of a beloved teacher. In the complex aftermath of the trial, Sullivan carried the story of Sarah Dawson with Hema, poignant reminder that justice was but one piece of a larger puzzle, one that required the unity of a community striving for compassion, and a renewed sense of purpose amidst the shadowed memories of their past. Reflection. As the seasons changed and time wore on, Detective Sullivan often found himself reflecting on the case, haunted by the delicate threads of fate that had woven through Sarah Dawson's life. Pine Brook had begun healing, yet the shadows of the past lingered, woven into the fabric of the town he'd called home for years. The community that had once thrived on light found itself marked by a tragic story that echoed through conversations and quiet contemplation. On the early mornings spent at the small cafe at the edge of town, he would listen to the murmurs of patrons recalling Sarah the way she had inspired her students, her steadfast belief in the potential of those around her, even in adversity. Her essence lingered, held close not just by a grieving community, but by those who had learned to keep her spirit alive through kindness and action. Sullivan would often ponder the role he played, grappling with the notion that justice served was not always synonymous with closure. He recognized that for every case he solved, there were countless lives irrevocably changed, stories that remained unfinished, and the emotional undercurrents that strained against the fabric of their lives. While justice had been sought and found, the true challenge lay in tending to the scars left behind. Through the pain and struggle, Sullivan found illumination. Grief was never truly linear. It wove through the heart and whispers of the soul, shaping who they were and how they would grow. The town's resilience in the face of tragedy illuminated a pathway forward, an understanding that from darkness could rise new beginning. Pine Brook would persist, emboldened by the lessons learned, forever marked but forever united by their collective commitment to honoring not just Sarah's memory, but the light of human compassion in a world that required it more than ever.